After finishing up the bulk of our taxes, I hit a roadblock. I couldn't proceed without the financial details from my wife's supposed business, which was more of a casual pastime than a serious endeavor. I had already mentioned to her that I needed her income, expenses, and other relevant records to complete the filings. Once I had done everything else, I reminded her again about her part, which was a mistake. My wife doesn't take reminders well. To her, even the slightest nudge feels like an unwarranted accusation. It was as though my bringing it up was a personal attack, despite the fact that her delay was holding up the entire process. She preferred to handle things on her own timeline, which left me waiting for 3 frustrating weeks. Finally, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I grabbed her laptop, hoping she might have already jotted down some of the necessary details. Predictably, there was nothing useful. Instead, I found her messaging app open. Curiosity got the better of me. I could have closed it and moved on, but her dismissive attitude had worn me down. I skimmed through the messages and noticed a particular coworker who was overly friendly, too friendly. His persistent advances were obvious, and as I read more, it became clear he had been trying to convince her to meet him for something far from professional. What's worse, she wasn't shutting him down. She seemed to enjoy the attention, even encouraging him in subtle ways. Each new exchange I read made my anger boil over. The breaking point came when I saw her reply to one of his suggestive messages. She admitted that his words were turning her on. My mind raced. Without hesitating, I picked up her phone and typed out a reply. Let's do it. Book a room at the Motel 6 for 3 o'clock, and I'll meet you there. With a mix of fury and adrenaline, I hit send. Then reality set in. What if her phone alerted her to his response? If she saw it, the entire plan would backfire. Heart pounding, I dashed upstairs. She was asleep, her phone resting innocently on the table. I grabbed it, unlocked it, and went straight to the app. Sure enough, he had already replied. Finally, you won't be able to walk when I'm done with you. Charming. I deleted the messages from her phone and my computer. Then I called my old friend Axel. Hey man, what's going on? Axel asked casually. I need you to meet me at the Motel 6 at 2:45. It's serious. I'm flattered, but I'm not into dudes, he joked. Not funny. One of Lillian's coworkers has been hitting on her, and I'm going to handle it. Got it. I'll be there, he said, his tone turning serious. Axel was the perfect ally. We'd been inseparable during our younger years. While he was all muscle, I was the smooth operator who could talk us out of trouble. His real name wasn't Axel. He'd chosen it because he thought it sounded tough. He wasn't the brightest, but he was fiercely loyal, just what I needed. When I arrived at the motel, Axel's car was already there. A man stepped out of another vehicle, phone in hand, and dialed a number. My wife's phone rang in my pocket, confirming he was the guy. I nodded to Axel, and we followed him as he entered a room. That's him, Axel asked. Ready for action? That's him, I confirmed. What's the move? Just scare him enough to make sure he leaves her alone, I said. No killing, Axel grinned. We both laughed as we approached the door. The man had barely closed it when Axel kicked it open with a resounding crash. I stormed in, and the guy's face twisted in shock. What the? Was all he managed before my fist met his jaw. Pain shot through my hand, and I realized I might have broken a finger. Axel stepped in and delivered a solid kick to the man's groin, dropping him to the floor. Axel grabbed him by the collar and hauled him onto the bed. What the hell are you doing messing with a married woman? Axel demanded, slapping him hard across the face. Take my wallet here. Take it. The man stammered, holding it out. Shut up, I growled. Do you think it's okay to try to seduce someone's wife? His eyes widened in terror. Oh God, you're her husband. I'm sorry. Please just leave. I won't call the cops or talk to her again. Axel chuckled and slipped a pair of brass knuckles onto his hand. What else do you want? The man whimpered, trembling. Revenge, I said firmly. Strip, Axel ordered. What, are you serious? Axel flexed his knuckles, and the man hurriedly undressed. He stood there, completely naked, his face flushed with humiliation. Axel and I burst out laughing. You thought you'd impress my wife with that? I mocked. Get out, Axel commanded. You mean outside like this? We nodded reluctantly. He stepped into the parking lot, his hands futilely trying to cover himself. Axel slammed the door behind him, and we watched through the window as the man scurried away in embarrassment. As we left, Axel turned to me. How's the hand, genius? Hurts like hell. I had been flexing my swollen fingers, but the satisfaction was worth every bit of the pain. The agony was almost unbearable when I glanced at my hand. It had ballooned to twice its usual size. Fantastic, I muttered. Probably wrecked a knuckle or something. My friend gave me a firm pat on the back. Come on, tough guy, I'll tag along to the ER. You'll need moral support. The x-rays came back clean in terms of fractures but revealed a nasty dislocation. They had to pop it back into place. The anesthetic injection burned like a lightning strike, but after what felt like an eternity, I left the hospital with my fingers snugly strapped in a splint. Strangely, the doctor's words stung more than the pain. He didn't mince his words, calling me reckless and launching into a full-blown lecture about how grown men should avoid brawling. I just nodded along, eager to escape. Despite the ordeal, I felt an odd sense of satisfaction. Hopefully, the guy would finally back off my wife. When I got home, I found Lillian pacing the living room like a storm cloud. Have you seen my phone? It's gone, she barked without responding. I tossed it to her and headed straight for the fridge. I cracked open a beer, only half listening as she erupted into a tirade about me kidnapping her phone. I downed the beer in one go, grabbed another, and interrupted her rant with a loud burp before retreating to the living room. I flipped on the TV and tuned into a golf tournament. There's something hypnotic about golf commercials, I thought. Every time I saw one, I'd feel an irrational urge to upgrade my clubs. You jerk, she shouted. Are you going to explain why your hand looks like that and what you were doing with my phone? I sighed and gestured toward the screen. Hang on. Tiger's about to talk. Turn it off, she shrieked. Who cares about Tiger Woods? Reluctantly, I paused the TV and turned to her. All right, let's talk about Lewis Tomlinson. Her expression froze. Lou Tomlinson? He's just some guy from work, she said a little too quickly. I smirked. Oh, really? Because according to you, Louie, you make me so hot when you talk like that. Her eyes widened. You went through my phone, didn't you? You're such a bastard. I raised my splinted middle finger. Guilty as charged, Sylvester. You absolute, she yelled. What were you thinking? I replied, don't worry. You'll come up with a punishment eventually. Just then, the doorbell rang. Hold that thought, I said, heading for the door. 2 police officers stood there. One of them, Jimmy, an old buddy, the other was vaguely familiar, probably from a bowling league. Hey guys, I said casually. Come on in. They stepped inside, and Jimmy cleared his throat. Sorry, Sylvester. This is official business. Evening, Lillian. I gestured for them to sit and popped open another beer. Make yourselves at home. You know, I'm not one to stir up trouble. Jimmy gave me a weary look. We picked up a guy running down 7th Street, buck naked. Nam's Lewis Tomlinson. He claims you and another guy beat him up and left him outside a Motel 6 with nothing but his birthday suit. Ring any bells? I chuckled. Come on, Jimmy. You know I'm more of a lover than a fighter. Then how'd you mess up your hand? He asked. Tripped over the garden hose, I said smoothly. Dislocated my finger trying to catch myself. Isn't that right, honey? Lillian hesitated but then nodded stiffly. Yeah, he's clumsy like that. The other officer frowned. Any idea why Tomlinson's blaming you? Before I could answer, Lillian jumped in. He's been harassing me for weeks. He's probably just trying to make Sylvester look bad. Jimmy's brow furrowed. Were you aware of this, Sylvester? I shook my head. No. But Lillian and I are definitely going to have a chat about keeping secrets. Jimmy sighed. If we find anything that links you to this, we'll have to take you in. You get that, right? I nodded. Sure thing. Good luck finding the real culprit, Jimmy. Jimmy gave me a tired smile. With our caseload, this will probably stay unsolved. Too much on our plate these days. I clapped him on the shoulder. Tell Jill I said hi, and remind your guys I haven't forgotten the 4th of July fiasco, I said as they left. Lillian glared daggers at me. You're lucky half the cops in this town like you. I shrugged and turned back to the TV. Our town was tiny, less than 5,000 people, so I knew most of the police officers personally. Hell, I'd even bailed a couple of them out of tight spots back in the day. Before I could fully relax, the doorbell rang again. Now what? I muttered, opening the door. Axel strode in, carrying a case of Molen ice beer. Supposed to be cold, you idiot, he said, placing the case in the fridge. It better be, I replied. Axel was the one guy who could insult me without sparking a fight, not because I feared him, but because he lived for the banter. He handed me a beer and glanced at Lillian. So, who were the cops I saw leaving? He asked. Jimmy and probably Kevin, I replied. How's Jill? He inquired, cracking open his bottle. I leaned back, ready to see where the evening would take us, when he asked about our afternoon. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. Yeah, he pressed for more. I gave a small nod in response. Well, we're still breathing, so I'd say things are all right, he quipped, a sly grin on his face. I offered a casual shrug. Unless this motel is rigged with cameras, I think we're in the clear. Haven't noticed any, he replied easily. Me neither, I agreed, turning to Lillian. His expression darkened. So, still shopping around for a better guy? The last one looked like half your dad's size. Maybe aim higher next time. I'm not looking for anyone, she shot back, her voice sharp. Our laughter at her indignation only pushed her to storm out, slamming the door behind her. What's the plan with her? He asked, watching the closed door with faint amusement. I recounted the events at the emergency room, but his advice was blunt. Either kick her out or make her welcome you at the door every day with some flair. The second option sounded more appealing. Suddenly, his tone shifted. Heads up, he muttered. She's coming back. Relax. I chuckled. It's fine. Our conversation drifted to avoiding the inevitable questions about retirement when Lillian returned. Lillian, grab me another beer, would you? Axel asked, rattling his empty bottle. She was about to snap at him but stopped short. Her gaze landing on his knuckles, hardened and deliberate. She groaned audibly. You two are hopeless, she muttered under her breath. Brand new, he responded, flexing his fingers. I've been itching to put them to the test today. Put them away, I interjected firmly. She's not impressed. With a reluctant sigh, he tucked his hands into his pockets. She needs to understand we don't tolerate dishonesty, he said. Technically, she hasn't done anything yet, I countered, though I knew it wasn't the strongest defense. Not yet, Axel shot back pointedly. The tension in the room lingered, even as we tried to lighten the mood with jokes. I had no clue how to handle Lillian and Axel's presence. It only postponed the confrontation I knew was coming. After a few beers, he stood up. All right, I'll leave her to you. Take care, I said, getting to my feet. He caught the flicker of anger in my eyes. Back off, Cook. She's guilty until proven otherwise, he growled. But if you need backup, you know where I am. We embraced briefly before he left. Or not having him around was better than going it alone. Later, I pulled a steak from the freezer and grabbed a cob of corn from the fridge. Alton Brown's method for cooking frozen steak had never let me down. After seasoning and searing it in a cast-iron skillet, I sat down to enjoy the meal. Just as I was cutting into my first bite, Lillian appeared. Where's mine? She asked quietly. In the freezer, I said, savoring my food. She knelt beside me, her voice low. I never slept with him. I know, I replied, my mouth full. You didn't have to hit him. One punch isn't a beating, I said flatly. Don't downplay what you did. Frustrated, I slammed my fork down. You think it's no big deal? I challenged. Fine, let's see how you feel if I do the same thing. I grabbed my phone and called her sister, Carla. She was younger, prettier, and enjoyed teasing relentlessly. "Hey, Carla," I began. "Got a few minutes to flirt? I need a distraction." "Unbelievable," Lillian shouted, snatching the phone. Carla's voice carried over as Lillian began yelling at her, too. I couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculous scene. "You're mad about this?" I asked, still laughing. "I wasn't going to sleep with her," she retorted. "It's not the same." "Why not? You entertained someone else's attention. How is this different?" I asked. "I didn't encourage him," she cried. "Then show me where you told him to stop," I demanded. She faltered. "I told him over the phone last night." "How convenient." The argument escalated. Finally, I said coldly, "Convince me why I shouldn't kick you out. You've got an hour after dinner." I relaxed with another beer by the time I settled on the couch to watch the news. Lillian reappeared, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Sylvester," she said softly, the rare use of my full name catching my attention. "I swear I didn't cheat," she sobbed. "How was I supposed to trust you wouldn't go further?" I asked quietly. She sank to her knees, resting her head on my lap. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this," she whispered. "All right," I said after a long silence. "Unlock your phone. Give me every password. Let me see everything. Maybe then we can start rebuilding trust." "Done," she agreed immediately. "You'll see there's nothing else," she hesitated. "But you might find things I've said to my friends about you. I'm not proud of it, but I always tell them how much I love you." "Fair enough," I replied. "I vented about you, too." We kissed, her desperation softening the tension. Then she asked cautiously, "What did Axel suggest?" I smiled as I stood. "Come upstairs. You can start right now."